My name is David Rains. I live in Beaverton, Oregon with my wife, Blaine Rains. My wife actually encouraged me to reach out to Westside Church to check if they had any therapy or some type of like sexual recovery programs, and 423 was there. I grew up in Los Angeles. My mom was actually raped, so I never met my biological father. I did have a super awesome stepdad though, who took care of me until I was about 8. I got into a lot of trouble growing up. I was in and out of detention, and because of that, my mom actually had me live with one of her friends, and I lived with this man, and that's where I had my first sexual experience. Actually, he molested me for maybe a few months or so. I never told my mom. Then one day, she actually saw his picture in a newspaper for molesting several other boys, and she asked me about it, and I denied it. I denied it all the way till I was 28. So I'm 29. So I never told anybody. 423 helped me dig deep into my story and why I do certain things. So that's where it started to come out recently. So from the age of 8 or 9, I think I found actually a pornography magazine in my mom's boyfriend's closet. And at that point, I learned what masturbation was through that experience. And I kind of just did that for a while. There wasn't the internet, so we just had magazines. I used pornography to kind of cope with life in general. I started having sex about 16. At the same time, I started smoking marijuana. I started doing drugs, started using methamphetamine. And so I would use drugs, sex, and pornography to kind of just deal with this hectic, crazy life that I had. Then I went in and out of jail a bunch of times. I got a felony and like 15 misdemeanors. Then I became homeless. So I was homeless for several months. I have a daughter. Her mom left me because I was a loser. Then I found Jesus. 22, homeless, meth addict, started reading the Bible, found Jesus. Then my life just took a turn from there. I actually still got into a lot of trouble. I was stealing cars. There was a difference in my life at this point where for the first time I felt conviction. One day I was in an abandoned apartment actually watching pornography and smoking meth for a week straight. It was crazy. And I really heard God tell me to move to Portland, Oregon to get into a drug rehab. 2 days later or so, I hopped on a Greyhound, came out here, went to rehab for about almost 2 years. And then within that 2 years, I didn't watch pornography, I stopped doing drugs, I stopped smoking cigarettes, stopped using profanity, all this stuff that I used to do. But I didn't have the internet in there. So what was interesting was I thought I kicked all this stuff, right? I thought I'm a new creation, I don't do these things anymore. But when I got out of rehab, I got a cell phone. But it didn't take long before I'd see girls in bikinis or something, and it kind of just re-sparked that sort of adrenaline rush that came from it. So one thing led to another. I started watching pornography again, but I didn't think I knew it was wrong, but I didn't think it was as devastating as it is and can be. I didn't know that I could be addicted to it either, which was a crazy thing to think about at the time. And I got plugged into a church a couple years later, and I started getting on a teaching team. So I'm teaching frequently at this church behind the pulpit on a regular basis. What was crazy was I would watch porn the night before preaching a message on self-control. I could speak to people, but I did not really let God into that part of my life. So I kept that kind of a sort of my own little secret. I just didn't really know what to do with this addiction I had. One day I did tell my pastor. He was super gracious. I had healing for about a month. Then I went back to watching pornography again consistently. Then I actually started going to see a different therapist. I actually paid a therapist $125 an hour. So I saw her a couple times, and then I went to a couple other groups, and nothing was really working. I was watching it so consistently, and I started to feel that there was no way out. This is it. This will be my thing. I can stop drugs. I can stop getting drunk. I can stop all this stuff, but this is it for me. And then I met my girlfriend, now wife. I told her actually 2 months into dating that, hey, I struggle with this, and she received it well, and she was happy I was honest. And she encouraged me to check out Westside, and that's where I found 423 communities. And that's where things started to take a turn for the better. Even when I share this with people, I do tell them that I wish I could say I've never watched porn ever since I joined 423. That's not the truth. What is true is that if I look at the timeline of joining 423 versus the other 2 decades of watching porn, is the amount or how often. So before I would watch porn every day for weeks or months or years, and now I can see large gaps in between when I do have a relapse, and I have more self-control and more awareness. I have hope and a community of people that surround me that have had victory and that have been through this process, and that can help me walk through it. And so I didn't have that hope before. My favorite part of group is hearing guys I respect be vulnerable. Guys that I really admire and respect being honest and saying, hey, man, this week was hard. This week I struggled with this or that, opposed to this elevated sort of, we usually put leaders on these elevated status and you never get to really peep into their life and see the struggles. But in 423, I really appreciate guys being honest about where they're at, no matter what level or status. They're just always honest and upfront. The way I would encourage someone to join if they're scared or unsure what that looks like is I would tell them that you will not have healing or beat this by yourself. 423 Communities is great because it's hundreds of other people nationally, but in your group, 11 other guys that are dealing with the same thing you're dealing with. Their story may be different, their age or ethnicity may be different, even sometimes religious preference is different, honestly, but they're struggling sexually in some way, shape, or form, and they'll be able to understand what you're going through and give you comfort and give you support and, just love you where you're at. There's a church that was considering bringing 423 Communities. I would encourage them to do it today. We know 70 to 80% of their members are struggling with watching pornography, and even pastors are dealing with. I think that there's men and women in these churches that aren't living up to their full potential, what Christ has for them, because of the shame they're in. 423 Communities helps give people hope and give people freedom through using the gospel, of course, as a catalyst. I think this needs to be not only in churches, but in other sectors in the secular world as well, where people can go and experience freedom from pornography and from sexual addiction in general.